In a previous lesson, we mentioned how the book of Ruth tells a beautiful and powerful story of restoration and salvation. It tells a story of hope and a story of faithfulness and covenant loyalty. And as we begin to enter into a period of study where we'll be looking at each chapter of the book a little bit closer, I hope that we will keep in mind the overarching picture through each of these, that the narrator wants us to see a picture of what faith looks like. Faith in action. Faith that is moving. James would describe it a faith that is living, I think, if we were to ask James of the picture of faith in the book of Ruth. And from the very first chapter of the book, we start seeing not faith, but the challenge to faith. What is it that is going to stand in the way of the characters of our story and the excuses that they would have to give up, to say, I won't live a faithful life, I won't do faithful things? Much of the first book is showing the emptying of Naomi. And so we're going to be thinking about it in the ideas of moving from full to empty. But I hope by the end of the chapter, we might have a slightly different perspective of what's going on. Now, I've said in the past that the book is written almost like a play. And we're going to continue to view it that way and recognize that in the first act, in chapter 1, we have a couple different scenes that play out before us that we are able to follow through and learn something, a little bit from the background, a little bit from the set, and a little bit from the conversations and dialogues that take place in them. And so I invite you, if your book is open to Ruth, to join along with us as we read through the chapter together. Starting with just verse 1. Now it came about in the days when the judges governed, that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. Narrator gives us our backdrop. We are living in the days of the judges. Having just studied that period, we recognize the statement is pregnated with great concern. This is not the glory days of Israel. This is a time in which Israel is certainly depicted not by faithfulness, but by faithlessness. And the idea of every man doing what is right in his own eyes echoes in our ears as we read those scenes, or as we read this scene. But the picture that also stands out in this is that things are not good in the land of Israel. Specifically, we're going to be focusing in on the city of Bethlehem, and we learn that there is a great famine that has occurred. Now, this idea of a famine might provoke in our eyes, or in our modern minds, the concept of a meteorological event. Something has occurred that has caused the crops not to produce. But the Israelites would have heard something very different when they heard the idea of a famine in the land. In Leviticus 26, verses 3 through 4, God had given them these instructions to walk faithfully before Him. He says, if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments so as to carry them out, then I shall give you rains in their season, so that the land will yield its produce, and the trees of the field will bear their fruit. The fruitfulness of the land was dependent upon the faithfulness of the children of Israel. They were going into a land flowing with milk and honey, but they were told it will not stay that way if you do not stay the course with me. In Deuteronomy 28, verses 20 through 24, that we read this. The Lord will send upon you curses, confusion, and rebuke in all you undertake to do until you are destroyed, until you perish quickly on account of the evil of your deeds, because you have forsaken me. The Lord will make the pestilence cling to you until He has consumed you from the land where you are entering to possess it. The Lord will smite you with consumption and with fever and with inflammation and with fiery heat and with the sword and with blight and with mildew, and they will pursue you until you perish. The heaven which is over your head shall be bronze, and the earth which is under you iron. The Lord will make the rain of your land powder and dust. From heaven it shall come down on you until you are destroyed. The concept of there being a famine in the land was intrinsically tied to the wrath of God being upon the land. And we get a sense of our irony because our story takes place in Bethlehem. From the opening scene, our story takes place in the house of bread. And yet, there is no bread in the land. There is no food. And it sets up the stage for a nameless wanderer to take his wife and 2 sons and begin journeying out of the land of Israel into Moab. And this is really a tragic response to what's going on in the land. Keep reading with me as the narrator zooms us in on this nameless figure and begins to flesh out his story even more. The name of the man was Elimelech, the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem and Judah. Now they entered the land of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They took for themselves Moabite women as wives. The name of one was Orpah, the name of the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the women were bereft of her 2 children and her husband. A couple ideas about what's going on here. The story, as it focuses in, is going to focus around this narrative of Elimelech, a man whose name means, "My God is the king." And so at some point in his life, he has had family that named him in honor of Yahweh, and pointing to the God of Israel as being the chief leader of the people of Israel. But we see that at this point in his life, he has turned to move outside of the land of Israel, moving away from the land which had been given to him by his father, or by his God, And he takes his sons, Mahlon and Chilion, with him. Now their names may have been changed as a storytelling narrative, but they may have been the names that they were given at birth as well. Mahlon is not well known. The meaning of it is somewhat obscure, but it generally is believed to be translated as sickly. And Chilion is a name that is translated from a word meaning failing. And so we don't get a very strong picture of the children that he has. And of course we have Naomi, a name that we will come to learn in a moment, is the opposite of bitter. It is a name that means pleasant. So we're not told, has Elimelech made this decision to take his children, to take his wife out of the land of Israel because of unfaithfulness? And in fact, the narrator will never really describe to us whether or not the motive behind this move was really one of wickedness. But the actions that we see him going up and experiencing is going to suggest that maybe it was. We're also not told that they intended for this to be a permanent move. That maybe they just simply were leaving for a period of time with hopes of things getting better and then coming back. But we do learn in the reading that whether or not their motives were permanent or not, whether or not they had decided we are abandoning God and abandoning His land, when they got to the land of Moab, they remained there. And even at a point we will read that the sons took wives there, and they had been themselves living in the land for 10 years. And the fact that they're going to the Moabites is an odd choice as well. An odd place for them to choose to go and to build a life for themselves. The Moabites were despised by the Israelites. They did not care for the Moabites at all. For one, they knew the ancestry, the origin story of the Moabites was one of incest, being the offspring of Lot and one of his daughters. But also, in a not too distant past, they had asked permission to pass through the land of Moab during the Exodus wandering. And the Moabites adamantly refused that and persecuted them. Then, in a bid to try and help a foreign power overtake them, Moabite women go in and seduce the children of Israel, and many men die because of this. But not too distant past would be Eglon, the king of Moab, who has persecuted and oppressed Israel and even taken captive some of the land until the judge Ehud is risen up to deliver them. So the choice to Moab is a very striking choice. It's an odd place on the map to pick to say, this is where I'll take my family. It also will make the inclusion of a daughter of Moab equally striking and surprising in later chapters of the book. We also discover in this opening scene that the wives that the boys choose for themselves, that the family that they create is a family that is described as barren. And again, it's never specified that whether or not this is a response by God to punish them. But when we consider chapter 4 is going to speak very, very openly about God allowing Ruth to conceive child. And also Deuteronomy 28, verse 18, just 2 verses before what we read earlier about the land not being fruitful, God also said that the women would not be fruitful either because of the sins of the people. It is again inferred that what's going on in this story is connected to unfaithfulness and to wickedness. And of course, at the close of that reading, we learn that all the men in the story have passed away. And so it's a tragedy. It's a tragic response that ends with tragedy, a tragic story. Naomi is depicted as a woman who in Israel was without a place without bread, leaving the land, and now she is a woman who is in Moab without husband, without child, and accompanied by 2 more women who are likewise bereft of their family. And it leads us into the 3rd scene in the chapter. And this is the scene where everything really begins to open up and unfold. We're no longer looking at the background imagery. Having set everything that's going on, the narrator wants to key us in on a very important conversation and the attitude of a very important individual. So read with me starting in verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the land of Moab, for she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she departed from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, No, but we will surely return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Return, my daughters, go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I said, I have hope, if I should even have a husband tonight and also bear sons, would you therefore wait until they are grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is harder for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. And they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Then she said, Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. Let's stop there for a moment before we examine the end of the scene. Naomi is going to return to the land of Israel because she has heard a good news. The Lord has visited his people. And Naomi recognizes that I am in the wrong place. Where I am is not where I should be. We aren't told at the beginning of this story that Naomi has any say in the move. We're not told whether she conspires with Elimelech or whether she simply follows him to the land of Moab. But none of that is the focus of the narrator. The focus is for her to recognize that she sees where she is at, and she sees the blessing of Yahweh that has been bestowed, and she says, I need to be where he is. We also discover that Naomi is very bitter during all of this. Her life, as she describes it, is one that has been marked by hardship and sorrow and disappointment and tragedy. But I would have us point out, the narrator wants us to see more than that her life has produced two people, two daughters-in-laws that she refers to as her daughters, two people who would consider leaving everything to follow her. Two people who would choose to leave their families, two people who would choose to leave their gods, two people who would choose to leave their nationality behind so that they could stay in the presence of Naomi. She's a hard figure in this story for us to really understand. Because at points we see things in her that we want to go, I would not want to be like that. And at other points we see in her characteristics and attributes where we say, I don't know if I could be like that. They're very, very inspiring moments in her life and very, very confusing moments as well. So Orpah will eventually return to her land, but I want us to key in again on verses 16 and 17 and listen to the words of Ruth. Ruth states, she makes a claim to loyalty. I am going to be loyal to you. And that's not uncommon. We will see that as we go through the Exodus account. The Israelites make several of these to God. Several claims that I am going to be loyal to you. But the words of Ruth here are marked as some of the more beautiful words in all of the Old Testament, especially words depicting love and faithfulness to another. And even though it's hard for us to see in our day, the way that we think about poetry, what she says is a poem. What she says has a chiastic structure. And as we've talked about chiasms in the past, they center, the center of the poem is the center of its meaning. And so as we kind of think about what she says with that sort of mindset, we recognize that what she's pleading to Ruth is more than just, I want to go and be where you are. There's more being said there than just that. So the chiasm is made up of 5 couplets of phrases, and they kind of work building towards that center point of C. So she begins and she ends with this command and this challenge. The command is more of a plea, but it's viewed as a command. Naomi, stop telling me to go home. Now it's said as a plea. You can almost picture her grasping, she's clinging to Naomi, begging her, please stop asking me to leave you. I have a desire to be with you. But not only does she say that she wants her to stop that, but she says if something is able to convince me to leave you, if something is able to convince me to turn back, then this God of Israel, Yahweh, which, by the way, how much can she possibly know of Yahweh, given the character of Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion? How much does she know of who he is? How much does she know of his law? We're never told that. We only really know that she knows Naomi. She says, I want the God of your people to do to me and worse, to abandon me and worse, if I ever depart from you. So she begins and ends this with a command and with a challenge. But then she makes these 2 location-based promises as she sets up the center of her plea. Where you go, I go. Where you lodge, I lodge. Where you die, I die. And where you're buried, I will be buried. I am never leaving you, Naomi. I am going to be with you. You're stuck with me from now until the ends of our lives. I want to be in your presence. But it's more than just I want to be with you. It's more than just I want to go where you go and be buried where you're buried. It's Naomi, I want to be a part of what you're a part of. That identity of Naomi is what Ruth wants to take on, that we see in the very center of this. Your people, my people. Your God, my God. All of this points to both somewhat of the character of Naomi and the person that she has been, but also to the character of Ruth. To recognize something that is good, something that is better than what she has back at her home, what she has amongst her own people and her own gods, something about this woman, this Israelite, and the God of the Israelites, that she says, I am begging you, please do not ask me to turn back from that ever again. Naomi is encouraged, and her daughter-in-law does what is unnatural. She loves her and begs to stay with her. That is faithfulness. That is sacrificial love. And that is what it continues to look like today. The natural response that Naomi points them towards is contrasted with the faithful response that Ruth begs for. And we can learn lessons from that. We can learn lessons from that in our marriages. The natural response of the world around us versus the faithful response of those who have been shaped and molded by love to say, we are one. We are an identity that is shared. It is a beautiful, it is a powerful picture. And Naomi relents, and the pair travel on to Bethlehem, where the scene will draw to a close. Pick back up in verse 18. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So they both went until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred because of them. And the women said, Is this Naomi? She said to them, Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi? Since the Lord has witnessed against me and the Almighty has afflicted me. So Naomi returned, and with her Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. So the city buzzes with excitement as they come back into the land. The appearance of these two seem to have drawn a lot of attention, some seemingly recognizing Naomi, who has been gone for at least some 10 years now. But if you notice the conversation that takes place, she says, Don't call me Naomi. Don't call me pleasant. Call me bitter. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. Again, we're not told that this is the case. The narrator does not come out and describe to us that God has done these things. But I also point out the narrator does not feel the need to challenge the accusation. He does not feel the need to defend God against the charge. But whether or not God did these things in response to their sin or not is really outside of the scope of the story. It's not the point. The point of the story is Naomi believes it. Naomi believes that God has inflicted these things against me. In the very next verse, we get the full list of the account. I went out full, but Yahweh brought me back empty. Shaddai has afflicted me. Naomi blames God for what has happened. But despite that, despite blaming God for the actions that have occurred and for bringing the calamity that has fallen to her lap, she has returned to God. She has returned to His promised land. She has not given up, but has returned to Him broken and empty and devastated. And there is a powerful picture in that. And as we think about that reality, the curtain drops on scene one. I want us to reflect on the things that we have just seen, and the things that we have just heard from the beginning of the book of Ruth. What do we take away from this? What is it that we come to the book of Ruth hearing and then go back into our lives and mull over some more and reflect upon? Some lessons that I think are important to understand from the very first chapter of Ruth. One is that the grass is not always greener on the other side. And is this not exactly how Satan desires to work in our lives? He desires for us to look just outside of the boundary in which we have been placed by our shepherd to say, this is where I want you to feed, this is where I want you to graze, and we look just outside into the neighboring field and say, but that looks better. That's where I want to be. But in James chapter 1, verses 14 and 15, James reveals to us the reality of those choices. That our desires that entice will ensnare and lead us to death. And that is a story that predates the book of Ruth. In the days of Lot and Abram, Lot chose the land that looked better, the well-watered plains which ran down to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it led to death. Or following the book of Ruth, in the days of the great King David, David chose the beautiful Bathsheba that was not his own, belonging to another. And in so doing, that led to the death of many. It is a repeated pattern in Scripture, a constant warning, seeking the place that we think is best versus the place where God has placed us, the place where His will is drawing us towards, where He is saying, this is the good land that I have brought you into. Moab was not where God's blessings were going to be found. God's blessings were going to be found in the house of Israel when broken and contrite hearts turned back to Him. All of those things that we read about Him saying, the sky above you bronze and the ground beneath you iron, all of the curses that He said would come upon the land were all reversible with simple repentance, with coming back to God. And that brings us to the second lesson that I think we learn in the book of Ruth, is no matter where we find ourselves, the solution is always coming to the Lord. The solution is always going to where the Lord is. When we find Naomi broken, when we find Naomi empty, she turns from Moab back to Bethlehem. And it's very reflective of the parable of the prodigal son. It's very reflective of this one who has this moment of coming to his senses. It is better in my father's house. Naomi has this coming to her senses, the realization, where I am, it's not where I need to be. It is better in the land of God. But reflect on that situation for a moment. How did she come about how did she come about making this decision to return? Well, it began with a very vital moment that we're not told anything about. We don't know the messenger. We don't know their identity in any way. But somehow news of the blessings of God came to the ears of Naomi. And when she hears the good news, she receives it with hope. God's blessings have been given. God's blessings can be found. In Bethlehem there is food. I must return to the Lord. How wonderful it must have been to hear that. No matter how bitter her life has made her, she is not drowned in her bitterness to the ability not to hear the good news and respond. And how wonderful it is today, the feet of those who come bringing the good news on the mountain that the Lord has come. The Lord has come and visited His land and brought the blessing of life, the blessing of a child born to us, sacrificed for our sins, that Christ has appeared, and that life can be found in Him. The solution in our lives maybe is not because of our sin, maybe it's not because of something we have done wrong, but the solution in our lives is to always run to the Lord with it, to run to the Father, recognizing that He has come bringing good news. But I think we can also learn from this that just because bad things have happened doesn't mean that good can't come from it. At the start of the chapter, it's really hard to see how this could ever be good again. everything that's going on. It's hard to see how this could ever turn around. It's just tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy. But we know how the story ends. We read through it anticipating the good things, anticipating the marriage that is to come, anticipating Obed and Jesse and David. Naomi doesn't know any of that. Naomi can't see over that horizon. Ruth hasn't even begun to imagine what's in store for her. How often do we accept the lies of Satan when he tells you this is all your life will ever be? This is all you will ever have. That this moment of tragedy, this moment of hardship, this moment of illness, this moment of sin, this moment that is so defining you right now is the only thing you will ever be and you will ever know. How often we listen to those lies. We hear him say, you'll only ever live in a land of famine. We hear him say, you'll only ever be a bitter and broken soul. We hear him say, you will always be the outsider who will never fit in. We hear him say, you will always be the king, fueled by lust, disgusting in your actions, murdering to cover your sins. We hear him say, you will always be the coward who said he wouldn't, but 3 times did deny the Son. But if we would listen to God, we would hear him say, no, you will be the family that I will bring the Messiah into the world through. You will be the king, which I will use to illustrate what a man of God really looks like. You will be the voice that will announce the arrival of my church and with it the good hope of the world. We can't know what the journey is going to produce unless we continue down it, unless we follow God to its end. So we don't listen to Satan. We trust in the Lord and we follow him. And on that journey, we have to see things clearly. Ruth's statement, I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty, is probably the backbone of the story of Ruth. Naomi's statement, Naomi saying that is probably the backbone of the story of Ruth. And in the end, in chapter 4, we will see the reverse of this phrase, that Naomi is taken from empty to full. God reverses all of this. But I want you to consider whether these words are even true at the beginning. I went out full. Naomi, you left because there was no bread in the land. Your husband led you out because you all were empty. This is why I came back empty. Naomi, you came back with Ruth, a daughter-in-law that we are all going to discover is an amazing, amazing woman. How about you? Do you see things clearly? We cannot let Satan distort the truth of what is really going on. Recognize that no matter where our life has led us, whether it be through hardship and suffering and pain, whether it be through our own sins, that we have become broken and that we feel hopeless, no matter how far we may feel from the presence of Yahweh, He is still there. He is still continuing to pour out His love in actions of kindness. A phrase that we sang this morning. I spoke about it with one of you all that I'd never really reflected on. One of the songs that Jackson led, actually it's Walker's song, Master, the Tempest is Raging, struck me very differently this morning. The closing of the chorus draws this picture of Jesus asleep in the bow of a boat as it is being shaken and rocked, and the people on it are convinced we're going to die, we're going to sink, and everyone is filled with fear. The songwriter, the hymn writer, has us sing, no waters can swallow the ship where lies the master of ocean and earth and skies. Do we see clearly? Do we see clearly what's going on? Do we see clearly the power and the majesty of our God, master of His creation? Do we see clearly that He is one, it would seem, His favorite pastime? What does God like to do when He has nothing better to do? He likes to make the impossible possible. He likes to take the spies and place them in the house of the harlot and use her to bring down a city and bring His people into the promised land. He likes to take the shepherd boy and overthrow the champion of the challenging armies. He likes to take the daughter who has committed her life to Him and to a husband and is nothing special other than that, and choose her to bring in the very King of creation itself and the Creator of all things, Jesus Christ. Do we see clearly our God, our circumstances, who we are? Where are you today? My friends, if it is not where you need to be, the good news has come. Draw near to the Lord today. Don't chase the promises of greener pastures away from Him, but trust in the Lord and wait on the Lord. If we can help you today to discover the fullness of God that is found in His Son, Jesus Christ, won't you please come forward and we'll talk about it together as we stand and as we sing.